Imagine you're the Philippine ambassador in Washington, and you're handed a letter with very specific instructions. This is for the president's eyes only. It isn't a routine diplomatic cable. It's a personal invitation from Donald Trump to join his newly minted Board of Peace. The pitch is grand. An elite circle of world leaders handpicked to reconstruct the Gaza Strip and eventually tackle conflicts the world over. For a moment, it feels like the ultimate seat at the table, a chance for Manila to stand shoulder to shoulder with the world's heavy hitters. There's just one catch. To be a permanent member of this inner circle, the expected stake is a cool $1 billion. When you look at the list of invitees, the contradictions start to pile up. Vladimir Putin says Russia is in, but only if the U.S. unfreezes his assets first. Meanwhile, the Philippine envoy is left trying to bridge a massive financial gap with a creative, if slightly awkward, counteroffer. Since the cash isn't there, Manila is suggesting human resources instead, essentially offering manpower in place of a billion-dollar check. It's a fascinating, almost surreal negotiation. On one hand, you have the Marcos administration viewing this as a duty to global stability and a way to cement their bond with a volatile Washington. On the other, you have critics watching from the sidelines with a sense of mounting dread. They see a board of peace that acts more like a private club with a fluctuating cover charge one, where the rules change the moment the chairman gets bored. It leaves you wondering, is the Philippines securing its place on the world stage? Or are they about to become the only ones at a high-stakes poker game who showed up with a resume instead of chips? We are looking at a situation that, honestly, it sounds like something out of a political thriller, but the implications are just aggressively real.
And today, we aren't just looking at the headlines of this Board of Peace.
No, we are looking at the mechanics of global reconstruction.
That is the word, mechanics. Because when you strip away the gala dinners and, the press releases, reconstruction is an engineering problem.
It's a physics problem.
Exactly. It's about tonnage and throughput and concrete.
So the mission for this deep dive is to compare the, let's call it the personality-driven model of this new board against the hard realities of logistics and, the state-led stability models that we're seeing elsewhere, particularly in Asia. We've got technical feasibility studies, legal charters, geopolitical maps.
A pack. We are essentially asking, does the world get rebuilt by a private club with a really high entry fee, or does it get rebuilt by boring, predictable state capacity?
And I think that's the perfect place to start, with the physical reality. Because before any piece happens, actual material has to move from point A to point B.
A whole lot of it.
I heard about a man named Roberto, a veteran logistics manager at the Port of Manila, who spent his afternoon staring at a flickering screen showing the skeletal remains of Gaza's coastline. He'd been told that his country might send human capital instead of the billion-dollar entry fee for this new Board of Peace.
Human capital, a very sterile term for people.
And you have to try to imagine Roberto's confusion as he looks at the throughput metrics required to rebuild a city from dust, the thousands of tons of rebar, the millions of cubic meters of concrete, and the specialized cranes needed to clear a blockaded harbor.
Things you can't just carry on your back.
Exactly. To him, reconstruction isn't a membership or a deal negotiated in some high-rise. It is a cold, hard calculation of port capacity and supply chain reliability.
It's math.
It's all math. And he wonders how a volatile, fee-based international board, subject to the shifting moods of a single powerful personality, could ever guarantee the decade-long stability required to move even a fraction of that cargo.
He's asking the right question.
For Roberto, the math doesn't add up. You cannot build a foundation on a subscription model. And looking at Roberto's perspective, I can't help but feel the weight of his skepticism. As a reporter covering global infrastructure, I see that while the Board of Peace makes for a grand headline, it lacks the boring, essential state capacity that actually moves mountains.
That's the key phrase, state capacity.
We're talking about physical output tons per day, berths per hour. When the leadership of such a board is characterized by volatility, the logistics of hope become a gamble that people like Roberto know usually ends in a bottleneck. We need predictable institutions, not high-priced clubs, to deliver actual results.
And Roberto's skepticism, it's not just a feeling, it's rooted in what we call throughput metrics.
Okay, let's drill down into that.
We really need to, because reconstruction is such a vague word until you look at the tonnage. The EcoPeace pre-feasibility study, it puts a hard number on this. They project that to actually rebuild Gaza, not just, keep people alive with aid, but rebuild it requires 5,500 truckloads per day.
5,500. Yeah. Because I think most people, when they hear aid, they visualize a convoy of maybe 20, 30 white trucks with UN flags on them.
Exactly. That's humanitarian aid. That's keeping the lights on, barely. We are used to seeing sacks of flour, medical kits. That is not reconstruction. Reconstruction is industrial.
It's a different scale entirely.
A completely different universe. To give you some comparison, the daily average of trucks entering Gaza in 2023 before the major escalation was around 500.
500. So we're talking about, what is that 11-fold increase?
It's an 1,100% increase in volume. It's a jump from, a country road to a 10-lane superhighway overnight.
So is that even physically possible with the current roads and crossings? I'm just trying to picture it.
Yeah.
I mean, 5,500 trucks. If you park them bumper to bumper, that is a traffic jam, roughly 100 kilometers.
Yeah.
That's a line of trucks stretching from Manila almost all the way to Batangas City every single day. A new one.
It is physically impossible. At least under the current paradigm, it's impossible. And this is where the human resources offer from the Philippines starts to look disconnected from the actual problem. Because the bottleneck isn't a lack of drivers. It's not a manpower issue. The bottleneck is the physical infrastructure of the crossings and the inspection mechanism.
The checkpoints.
The checkpoints. So right now, at crossings like Kerem Shalom, every truck is scanned one by one. It's a slow, deliberate process for security reasons, of course. But if you have to process 5,500 trucks in a 24-hour period, just do the math on that.
Okay, that's roughly 230 trucks an hour.
Right, which gives you, what, about 15 seconds per truck?
15 seconds. To scan an entire 40-foot container for weapons, for contraband, for what they call dual-use items.
It's a fantasy. It's impossible. And that's just for the easy stuff, the containerized cargo.
The stuff in meat boxes.
Exactly. The real nightmare for logistics people like Roberto is what's called break bulk cargo.
Okay, explain that distinction for us. What is break bulk?
Containerized cargo is, like you said, meat. It's in a box. You can put the box through a scanner. Break bulk is all the stuff you desperately need for construction that doesn't fit in a box.
So steel beams?
Long steel rebar, yeah. Huge cement mixers, prefabricated wall sections, large panes of glass for buildings, industrial piping for water and sewage, earth-moving equipment.
Things you can't just run through a standard X-ray machine at the border.
It requires specialized handling, heavy lift cranes, massive laydown areas where you can inspect it piece by piece. It's slow, it's cumbersome, and it takes up a huge amount of physical space.
So Roberto, sitting there in his office at the Port of Manila, he's looking at this list of requirements and he's not thinking about a board meeting.
You don't need a board, you need a new port.
A whole new port.
Or several. You need what that study calls a paradigm shift. It says the current borders, Kerem Shalom, Rafah, they are functionally obsolete for this level of throughput.
So you have to start from scratch.
You need to build entirely new, purpose-built logistics hubs. The study suggests a North Gaza hub and a South Gaza hub, maybe even a sea-based terminal.
And what goes into a hub like that?
You're talking about installing multiple high-speed radiographic scanners that cost tens of millions of dollars each. You need to build massive warehouses, including cold chain storage for food and medicine so it doesn't rot in the sun while waiting for clearance for days on end.
This sounds like a 10-year heavy engineering project.
Absolutely. And this brings us right to the core conflict, the mismatch between the plan and the reality.
The plan being the Board of Peace.
Right. Because a 10-year heavy engineering project requires one thing above all else. And that's what the analysts call durable governance.
Stability. Predictability.
Exactly. If you're a government or a private consortium and you are going to sink, say, $3 to $5 billion into building a new port and a new highway system,
you need to know that the rules aren't going to change halfway through.
You need to know that the political environment will be stable in 5 years. You need to know the border won't be arbitrarily shut down for 3 months because of a tweet from the chairman.
And the Board of Peace. That's where the problem lies.
The Board of Peace is the opposite of durable governance. It's a private club. It has a fluctuating cover charge. And critically, it has a chairman, Donald Trump, with absolute unchecked veto power over everything.
The intro text said it perfectly. The rules change the moment the chairman gets bored.
And that's the killer. If I'm an investor or even a logistics planner like Roberto, I look at that level of volatility and I walk away.
Of course. You can't risk it. I can't have my billion-dollar cranes and my specialized scanners rusting on a dock because the chairman got into a feud with the supplier's home country.
You cannot build a foundation on a subscription model. It just doesn't work. Which brings us back to the Philippines offer.
The human resources.
While it's a noble gesture, from a purely logistical point of view, it's a category error.
A category error, what do you mean by that?
They are offering a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. They are offering labor to a problem that is defined first and foremost by capital intensity and a massive infrastructure deficiency.
It's like showing up to a Formula One race and offering to run really, really fast on the track.
It doesn't matter how fast you can run. The game is about the machine.
And the machine costs billions of dollars.
Billions. The board is asking for chips for capital to buy the machine. The Philippines is offering to be the pit crew. And in this specific high-stakes game, the pit crew doesn't get a seat at the main table.
This mismatch between the deal and the reality is just, it's stark. And it brings us to the second part of our analysis.
Right.
Because while the Philippines is trying to buy into this personality-driven model from the West, they are actually living through a very different model of reconstruction right at home.
One that is state-led and, well, one that actually works.
The comparison here is just fascinating. We need to look at how infrastructure actually gets built when you take the personality out of the equation.
And when you replace it with something much more boring.
Boring is good.
Boring gets things done.
I saw a story online about Mateo, a local civil servant in a province south of Manila, who was walking across a newly completed bridge, a project born from a long-term state-led partnership with China's Belt and Road Initiative. He remembers the paperwork. It was dense, institutional, and most importantly, it survived 3 changes in local leadership.
3 changes. That's significant.
Because the model was baked into the state apparatus of the provider. Now, Mateo reads about the Board of Peace and the invitation sent to President Marcos Jr. He sees a project tied not to a state's long-term strategic output, but to the personal brand of a Western politician known for tearing up agreements as quickly as he signs them.
A very high-risk individual, politically speaking.
Absolutely. So Mateo looks at the bridge under his feet, solid, physical, and predictable. And then at the news on his phone, which describes a board that sounds more like a chaotic boardroom reality show than a sovereign commitment.
I think a lot of people see it that way.
He realizes that for a developing nation, stability isn't a buzzword. It's the difference between a completed bridge and a half-built rusted pier. Reading about Mateo's realization makes me reflect on the sheer efficacy of the state-led model. While Western narratives often focus on the personality of leadership, the Chinese model, as seen in the BRI, operates with a mechanical persistence that transcends the individual.
Mechanical persistence. That is the phrase that just jumps out at me from that.
It sounds boring, doesn't it? That's great.
Boring is essential. I mean, let's look at why Mateo's bridge survived 3 changes in local leadership. In a personality-driven system, which we see a lot in the West, when a new mayor or a new president comes in, what's their first instinct?
Cancel everything the previous guy did.
Exactly. To cancel the previous guy's projects, they want to put their own name on something new to get credit for it.
Right. That was the old administration's bridge. My legacy will be this new tunnel over here, even if the bridge was 90% done.
But the Chinese model, the state-led model, is designed specifically to create what analysts call stickiness.
Stickiness.
The agreement isn't with a person. It's not with Mayor Cruz or President Smith. It is with the state. It's a treaty-level commitment.
So it's baked into the bureaucracy.
It is baked into the 5-year plans of the Ministry of Public Works. It is secured by sovereign guarantees and financing from massive state banks like the Exim Bank or the China Development Bank. These are institutions with a very, very long-term view.
So even if the new mayor wants to cancel it to build his tunnel,
he can't. Not easily, not without triggering a major diplomatic incident or a sovereign debt default. The project has what we call institutional memory.
It's bigger than any one politician.
It moves forward like a glacier slow, perhaps, and you can argue about the terms, but it's unstoppable. It just doesn't care who is sitting in the mayor's office this week.
Now let's contrast that directly with the Board of Peace. The structure described in his charter is, well, it's unique.
It is the polar opposite. It is designed to create a singular point of failure.
The chairman.
The chairman. The charter gives, and this is a quote, extraordinary authority to a single individual. That one person, Donald Trump, controls membership. He controls the executive board. He is the sole interpreter of the charter itself.
So it's not a glacier, it's a volcano. It's all centered on one point.
It's all energy, but it's high energy with low institutional gravity. It can erupt, but it can also just go dormant.
Yeah.
The International Crisis Group, in one of its reports, noted that Trump's previous peace deals were often quick bargains.
They looked great on TV.
Fantastic on TV. Handshakes on the White House lawn, big signatures. But because they weren't baked into a boring, slow, bureaucratic institution, they lacked any real enforcement mechanism.
So they were flashes in the pan.
Exactly. And when the flash faded, the old conflicts often reignited because the underlying structural problems hadn't been solved. There was no mechanism left behind to manage the peace. The personality had moved on to the next deal.
And this brings us back to the money and the way the money works in these two systems.
Difference.
The state-led model involves loans, and sometimes controversial loans, yes, it involves debt, but it is transparently transactional in a way that businesses and states understand. You get X billion dollars to build Y bridge with Z specification.
Right. It's a contract. But the Board of Peace is different. Walden Bellow, a sociologist we reviewed, had a really blunt take on this. He said, Trump only understands cold cash.
Okay.
But the board kind of. It obfuscates this. It pretends to be a philanthropic peace mission, a grand humanitarian gesture.
But the $1 billion entry fee makes it a club.
A very exclusive club. A club where paying your dues is less about funding the project and more about validating the leader. It's about buying access and favor.
And for a developing nation like the Philippines, you're saying that is a dangerous place to be.
Look, Mateo trusts the bridge under his feet because the concrete is real. He can touch it. He can see it working. He distrusts the board because the promise is tied to a man who, based on all historical precedent, might change his mind next week.
If the chairman gets bored, the board dissolves.
But if the Chinese premier changes, the bridge contract remains in force.
It's a choice between predictable output and charismatic volatility.
And this leads us to the broader implication here, because this isn't just about building bridges in Manila or ports in Gaza.
No, it's about how nations relate to one another on the world stage.
The board isn't just offering a service, it is actively drawing lines on a map. It's forcing people to choose sides.
This is where we get into the geopolitics. And frankly, this is where the invite becomes less of an invitation and more of a weapon. A geopolitical wedge. Try to imagine a young diplomat named Clara sitting in a quiet office in the Department of Foreign Affairs in Pasay City. She is looking at a map of Southeast Asia, specifically noting which neighbors were invited to this Board of Peace and which were pointedly ignored.
A very stressful meeting for her, I imagine.
Right? The invitation isn't just a request for help, it's a geopolitical wedge. Clara was raised on the Asian way, the principle of non-interference and collective survival through neutrality.
The guiding principle of the region for decades.
To her, this board feels like a demand to pick a side in a Western-centric drama, a move that threatens the delicate economic cooperation her region has spent decades building with all powers, including China. She sees the invitation as a maneuver to create a coalition of the willing that disrupts the quiet, stable progress of Asian integration.
It's asking them to break something that's been working for them.
For Clara, peace shouldn't come with a price tag of political alignment or the risk of alienating the very neighbors the Philippines relies on for its economic future. And I understand the discomfort Clara feels. In my coverage of Asian geopolitics, it's clear that the Western alignment strategy is often at odds with the Asian survival strategy.
Alignment versus survival.
While the Board of Peace is framed as a moral or charitable endeavor, its selective invitation list reveals it to be a tool for division. My sense is that the Philippines is being asked to trade its long-term regional harmony for a seat at a very volatile table. We must respect the desire for non-interference. True peace in a multipolar world isn't built by drawing lines, but by maintaining the circles of cooperation that already exist.
That concept of the geopolitical wedge is crucial, because usually when we talk about peace summits or reconstruction efforts, what's the goal?
To get everyone in the room, to build consensus.
You want maximum buy-in, but this guest list is very curated.
Let's look at it. Let's look at ASEAN specifically. Who got the golden ticket?
The Philippines, for one, which makes sense given their treaty alliance with the U.S. Then you have Indonesia and Singapore.
Okay, major economic players.
And then the interesting one, Vietnam.
Vietnam is a very interesting case. I mean, they're technically a communist state. They have an incredibly complex relationship with both the United States and China.
And our sources indicate that Vietnam is on a bit of a blacklist when it comes to, trade surpluses with the U.S.
So their invitation isn't necessarily an honor.
It feels less like an honor and more like a summons. It has a join us or face potential tariffs kind of vibe. It's coercive.
It's leverage. Okay, so that's who is in, who is left out in the cold.
The big ones are Thailand and Cambodia.
Why? Thailand is a major U.S. ally,
Yeah.
Huge economy. They have a lot of capacity to help.
But they are perceived in some Washington circle as being too close to China. And in the case of Cambodia, there are ongoing border tensions. The point is, the board is excluding countries not based on their ability to help rebuild Gaza.
But based on their loyalty to the chairman's particular worldview at that moment.
It's a friends and enemies list. And the result is that it creates a fissure right down the middle of ASEAN.
A division between the ins and the outs.
And this fundamentally violates the core tenet of the Eisenway.
Is it just a slogan? Or is that a real policy?
Yes, it's very real. It's a survival mechanism. You have to understand the geography and the history. These are small and medium-sized powers living in the shadow of giants.
You have the U.S. Pacific Fleet on one side.
And the massive Chinese economy on the other. For decades, the only way they have survived and prospered is by practicing what's sometimes called bamboo diplomacy.
Bamboo diplomacy.
You bend with the wind, but you don't break. You maintain your independence by having good relationships with everyone. You trade with everyone. You don't pick sides in great power conflicts.
But the Board of Peace forces you to pick a side.
Explicitly. By demanding $1 billion and unwavering loyalty to the chairman, you are effectively signing a loyalty oath. You are joining a Western-led political alignment.
And that's what scares a diplomat like Clara. Because if the Philippines becomes the de facto U.S. hub in the region, what does that do to its relationship with Vietnam? Does it make Indonesia, a massive and proudly independent nation, suspicious?
It threatens the entire regional harmony that has kept the peace and fueled economic growth for half a century. But I want to go even deeper into the history here, because this isn't a totally new idea.
Okay.
There's a fascinating analysis in the Global Policy Journal that compared this board to the mandate system of the old League of Nations after World War I.
This is the empire argument, but not the Star Wars kind of empire.
No, the 1920s old-school European kind. Back then, the League of Nations didn't treat all countries as equals. They literally graded them based on their perceived level of civilization or fitness to rule.
That sounds incredibly patronizing.
It was colonialism with a multilateral veneer. You had Class A mandates, which were places like Iraq and Syria seen as almost civilized and ready for independence soon.
Almost.
Then you had Class B, mostly African colonies, which were seen as needing more guidance, and Class C, like Pacific Islands, which were essentially treated as territories to be ruled indefinitely by the mandate holder.
And the argument is that the Board of Peace is bringing back this kind of tiered, hierarchical thinking.
Look at how the world is being treated in this framework. Europe is treated like a wayward subordinate, a rich teenager that needs to be brought back in line and forced to pay its share.
Okay.
A country like Iran is treated as a Class C problem to be contained and managed, not engaged with. And then the loyal allies, like the Philippines or Poland, are given a chance to sit at the adults' table.
But only if they pay the fee.
Only if they pay the $1 billion fee. It is, in effect, a civilizational grading system based on loyalty and cash.
It reintroduces a clear hierarchy into international law. The United Nations, for all of its many, many flaws, is at least built on the foundational idea of sovereign equality. One nation, one vote in the General Assembly.
A powerful, if imperfect, idea. The board completely replaces that with pay to play.
Which brings us to the final, and maybe the most cynical part of this entire mechanism, the poker game. We keep saying $1 billion, but the way that money is being moved or offered, it reveals the true nature of the board.
The financial engineering here is just as important as the civil engineering we talked about at the start.
Well, let's talk about the charter again. Permanent membership, a permanent seat on the board, requires a $1 billion contribution.
That's the hard deck. You want to vote on where the money goes, you have to pay to get in the room.
But then, in the middle of all this, Vladimir Putin raises his hand.
And this is the twist that really gives away the game. Putin says, I want in. Russia is ready to join the Board of Peace.
Which is deeply ironic, given the global context.
It gets better. He says, I will pay your $1 billion. I'm good for it. But I am not writing you a check from Moscow.
So where's the money coming from?
He says you have to take it from the hundreds of billions of dollars in Russian sovereign assets that you, the West, have already frozen.
Wow. That's a fascinating strategic maneuver. He's using the sanctions against the sanctioners.
It is a hostile takeover of the board's own logic. He is calling their bluff. He's saying, If this is just a transactional club, then let's make a transaction. You want my money? It's right there in your banks. Just unlock it.
And if the board accepts that offer?
If they accept, they are effectively laundering frozen assets to fund their own signature project. It completely validates the criticism that this isn't about morality or peace. It's purely about the deal. Any deal.
I'll pay your cover charge if you unfreeze my wallet.
And while this high-stakes geopolitical poker is happening, the United Nations is being systematically pushed toward the exit. The strategy described in one analysis is the wood chipper.
That is a very violent image for a bureaucratic process.
It's an institutional wood chipper. The goal isn't to fix the UN, it is to starve it. You remove its funding, you remove its legitimacy by calling it corrupt and ineffective, and you build a parallel structure, the board, that handles the real business of the world.
And we saw this with the treatment of people who don't toe the line. There was the incident with the Canadian Prime Minister.
For example, he went to Davos, the traditional center of globalism, and he criticized the U.S. approach on trade.
And the consequence?
He was immediately and publicly disinvited from any potential role on the board.
In a real parliament or in the UN General Assembly, you can stand up and criticize the leadership and you still keep your seat. That's the entire definition of political discourse.
In the Board of Peace, dissent is grounds for immediate expulsion. It's not a forum, it's an echo chamber. And that is why countries like Germany and Italy have reportedly called it unconstitutional in their internal briefings.
Because their own laws prevent them from joining something like this.
A German chancellor cannot legally subordinate the German state and its budget to a private board where a foreign citizen holds absolute veto power. It breaks the fundamental concept of national sovereignty. You cannot outsource your foreign policy to a club, no matter how exclusive.
So let's bring this all back to the Philippines. The ambassador is holding that letter. The president in Malacanang is weighing the options.
It is a genuinely terrible dilemma to be in.
They are showing up with a resume, with their offer of human resources. They are thinking in terms of duty and alliance and global stability.
And everyone else at that table is playing a ruthless game of cold cash and transaction.
The risk is that the Philippines becomes the sucker at the poker table. They're the only ones playing by the old rules of friendship and international duty, while the new rules are purely mercenary.
And they might end up paying a price much, much higher than $1 billion. They might pay with their regional stability and their long-held neutrality.
I mean, we started with the physics of a port in Gaza.
With Roberto in his spreadsheet.
Exactly. Then we moved through the concrete stability of Chinese-built infrastructure in the Philippines.
With Mateo on his bridge.
And we ended up in a geopolitical poker game that feels like it's redrawing the map of the world.
It's a complex and, frankly, a worrying picture.
Let's just recap the 3 core perspectives we heard today, just to tie it all together. First, Roberto, the logistics manager.
Roberto reminds us that reconstruction is physical. It's not an idea. It needs throughput. It needs scanners and cranes and decades of boring, predictable stability. You cannot tweet a port into existence.
Then there was Mateo, the civil servant.
Mateo shows us that the state-led model, for all its own issues, works for big infrastructure because it has institutional memory. Sticks, the bridge gets built, the personality model is too often just a flash in the pan.
And finally, Clara, the young diplomat.
Clara sees the trap. Joining the board forces a breach of the Asian way. It forces the Philippines to pick a side, creating a wedge in its own region that could last for a generation.
So the Board of Peace, it promises a new world order. But when you actually look at the port metrics and the bridge foundations and the diplomatic maps, it appears to be an incredibly fragile construction.
Fragile is the right word.
It seemed to be built on cash and personality, rather than on concrete and consensus. And for nations like the Philippines, the cost of admission might be much higher than the billion-dollar price tag. It might cost them their regional stability.
And that is a price that is very, very hard to recover once it's paid.
We've unpacked the logistics, the stability, and the geopolitics of this whole proposal. Now it's up to you to look at the news as it unfolds and decide if what you're seeing is the building of bridges or just the paying of cover charges.
Thank you.